This week, U.S. Congress has a hearing on ransomware's effect on small business. Cloud identity and access management, next-generation firewalls in the cloud, some news from Ixia, EdgeWave, and Forescout does a market guide on IoT security. NOPSEC teams up with cyber insurers to expand protection for cyber threats. And in our discussion for this week, non-security skills for the enterprise security professional. All that and more on this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly. This is a Security Weekly production.
Brought to you by IT Pro TV is an easy, entertaining approach to online IT training. Access over 2,000 hours of up-to-date, high-quality video content live and on demand via your Chromecast, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, PC, mobile device, or their recently launched Apple TV app. Corporate and group pricing are available, and now through December 31st, if you purchase a premium annual membership, you'll get an additional 3 months on your first year. Visit itpro.tv/enterprise security and use the code ES30 for a free 7-day trial and 30% off for life. Logarithm's Netmon Freemium delivers real-time network visibility to quickly identify emerging threats in your IT environment. Netmon Freemium is a free commercial-grade network forensics and traffic analytics solution. You can use Netmon Freemium's powerful capabilities to search against all of observed network traffic, identify abnormal traffic patterns and application usage, and quickly analyze full packet captures. Take the first step towards real-time network visibility. Visit logarithm.com/freemium to learn more and download it today.
Welcome, everyone, to this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly. I'm, of course, your host, Paul Asadorian, CEO here at Security Weekly and CEO of Offensive Countermeasures. With me again this week, making a return appearance for the second week in a row, because John Strain is teaching at San CDI in Washington, D.C., Don Pezet from itpro.tv. Don, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Paul. Really glad to be back on the show with you.
Yeah, it's nice to have you as a co-host here today. Again, this is going to be a lot of fun. Just a couple of quick announcements. Well, Don, what have you got going on at itpro.tv?
I got a couple of interesting things going on. This week we're filming some like Agile project management and lean Agile, the soft skills, the managerial type things. So it's a nice little break. I just finished a series on DNSSEC and how to deploy that. We know poisoning, DNS cache poisoning is such a big problem these days. And DNSSEC is one of those things that's just, it's a little annoying to figure out, but once you get it figured out, it's not that hard, and you got to get it put in place. So we've been doing coverage on that. A lot of good stuff.
Well, that's awesome. So it's interesting you mentioned Agile project management, which is exactly some of the stuff that we wanted to talk about this week. So that's awesome. We're talking about non-security skills for the enterprise security professional. And I'll admit, I got this idea. I was looking through all of your course materials and building out the staff here at Security Weekly. And not all of us are security professionals that need security training, right? We need other skills as well, whether we're security professionals or not. And I wanted to talk about some of the ones that are, for this discussion, most important when you're working in an enterprise doing IT or IT security. And you just mentioned Agile project management. I understand project management. I'm not very good at it, which is why I hire people that are good at it. But what is Agile project management?
So one of the biggest reasons people hate project management is to a lot of people, the term project management equals bureaucracy, right? It's more paperwork. It's a lot of extra things you have to do to get something done that would have only taken you 5 minutes.
It's using Microsoft Project. Oh my God, now I'm having really horrid memories. That program was awful. I'm sure there's people that into project management that maybe liked it, maybe not, but it was horrible. Terrible experiences.
The sad part there is it's horrible, and yet it's the best project management software there is. So the best is horrible.
Wow. Is that so? Do people still use Microsoft Project today?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the bigger ones that's out there.
And is it a cloud-based app?
It is, except they've priced it really bizarre, so it's super expensive to go cloud-based. But when you do it, it does
I
some
see.
impressive things.
Yeah.
It's uncommon for people to be attached to one project. So you might be on 10 different projects, and if you I'm going to commit sacrilege here, but if you're an all Microsoft shop, and so you fire up Outlook for your email, and it integrates with Project Server, so your tasks and your calendar for
I
that day
see.
show all the things you're working on. I mean, that's where the value in something like that
I
comes
got you.
in.
So sorry, we got off on a tangent there. Agile project management is what exactly?
All right, so normal project management takes forever. And what
Yeah.
Agile does is it says, we're not going to try and put a 5-year plan together. Let's just try and plan for a sprint. Let's plan for a couple of weeks or a couple of months and make it where we can do rapid change. And it just accounts for that and allows change to happen in a less risky environment. And I've worked in both types of environments, ones that were extremely structured. You've got to do things by the book, and it took forever to make a simple change, to ones where it was fly by the seat of your pants. Everybody's doing whatever they want. And they both have their pros and cons, but at the end of the day, we've got to keep equipment running. We've got to keep the network secure. And so you got to find a good mix of the two. And that's what Agile project management tries to do.
Yeah, and I think for your IT security professional, you alluded to the fact that, sure, I might be on a project to, say, implement a firewall, and that's a project. And the project managers are always like, okay, well, so what are your milestones? And that can be a difficult question, but I think, okay, so these are my milestones, right? But then they come back every week or every day and say, how are you doing meeting your milestones? And you're like, well, I just lost 2 days because, the IDS blew up or something, or we had an incident or something else blew up, and now I'm not going to meet my milestone. So being more agile with that project management, I think, is really key, at least from my experience in participating in projects.
Yeah, the story I always tell is I work for an organization, and this is an absolutely true story, where we were halfway through a project and we were pushing out, I don't remember, I think it was like 150 firewalls. And I found a bug in our deployment software where some of the firewall rules they weren't enabling. And so you'd push these rules out and they weren't doing what they were supposed to do. And if you rebooted the firewall, it fixed the problem. Well, I solved it for the firewalls we hadn't rolled out yet, but for the ones that were already out there, I wanted to reboot the firewalls. Well, I had to have a conference call with 5 people. I had to submit change tickets. It took over a week for me just to reboot. That was about 25 firewalls. And that kind of thing is so frustrating because I could have done it that very night after hours. No one would have noticed, and it would have solved the problem. But when you have people acting independently like that, you can have one person make a change that breaks something someone else is working on. So there's got to be communication. And the key thing with Agile is you have, they call it a scrum or a 15-minute stand-up meeting every single day. And you can discuss things like that as a group and make rapid change.
Yeah, why do they call it a scrum? What is that? I've seen that recently. What's a scrum? Does that stand for something?
No, it comes from rugby, right? So in rugby, all the players, they form a big circle and they put the ball right in the middle and they just push. If you've ever watched a rugby match, it's pretty crazy because they'll sit there and push and hammer each other. And at some point, the ball pops out and one of the players has it. And that's kind of like a face-off in hockey.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I like the 15-minute stand-up meetings. I've done those before. I think they're incredibly useful for a lot of reasons. One, it keeps people engaged, right? And I think when you're doing any kind of IT security project, or any project, it's important to keep people engaged in the process. So.
Yeah, and I hate meetings. Meetings oftentimes they're the bane of our existence, right? But you have to have them. And so one of the skills that I always push for people that I work with is having effective meetings. If you go to a meeting and you leave with no action items and you didn't provide input that led to a decision, then you shouldn't have been in the meeting. It was a waste of your time. So you've always got to end meetings with action items. You've always got to have something tangible that came out of it. And if you don't, you're literally wasting people's time. It's the worst thing you can do.
So now you folks have training on project management. I think it's important for people in IT security to you come up to speed on project management, and even if that means you're just better at managing your own projects, you're better at participating in larger projects and understanding the process is important. I've had certainly my fair share of interfacing with project management and project manager. When I worked at the lottery company, there were project managers, and I mean, it was new to me to work with project managers, and wow, what a lesson that was in how to complete a project and how to track a project and things of that nature. But I think getting some formal training on that, I think, is really good for us in IT security, because we, at any given time, have so many projects on our hands that learning a way to effectively manage that is important.
And the secret to making it really effective is you got to get buy-in from the executives, the C-series people, but IT security needs to be involved from the planning, even before the planning stage, before the project charter is issued, really. When they come up with some crazy idea, like, hey, the company should do XYZ, and it would just take 2 seconds with an IT security officer for them to tell you everything that's wrong with that and why you can't do it. And I've seen so many projects where the security team is not notified until after the project is rolling out, and there's weaknesses and vulnerability and risk of data and just data retention that has to be dealt with, and all of that hasn't been accounted for. So the earlier you get involved in a project, the sooner you can make sure that it's being deployed correctly and not weakening your environment. That is a critical thing to do.
Yeah, I think for a lot of projects, security is going to be sometimes a smaller part of it, and just providing input and making sure that the technology or whatever project is being completed has a security component to it. I also think there's a lot of other projects where security may lead the charge to, say, implement a VPN or implement a NAC. And those projects, because they touch everyone from an end user to the help desk to the desktop support to the Windows team, like those are projects where you may have to, in an IT security role, take charge and be the project manager when you're implementing those projects. And I think for that reason, it's super important to stay ahead and stay on top of your project management skills. As horrible as I think they are, it is to do.
It is. And a similar topic is service management. So, projects are short-term things that begin and end, but service management, that's the ongoing business. And so the hot topic there is ITIL. A lot of us have had to deal with ITIL. And
what is ITIL now?
So ITIL actually, it came out of the UK.
All these things come out of the UK. We got rugby, right? Did rugby start in the UK? Am I correct in stating that?
We need to start playing unlicensed Beatles music in the background, and we.
Yes.
But what they had was that the government had all these IT projects, and they had a higher failure rate than non-IT related things. And they were rolling out new IT infrastructure. This is years ago, 15, 20 years ago. And all this new infrastructure was coming out, and some of it had huge budget overruns, and things just weren't going right. And so they stepped in and they said, look, we need to create a set of guidelines on how IT departments should be run, how projects should be managed, how incidents should be reported, how data retention should be managed, all the aspects of running IT. And so they created this they call it the Information Technology Industry or Infrastructure Library. And it's just a collection of every bit of information you need to know, from the accounting piece to the management piece to the help desk piece. It's all in there. And companies, when they start to initiate these new projects or they create new departments, instead of reinventing the wheel, they can take this library and structure themselves off of it. And it's been gaining popularity here in the U.S. over the last 10 years. On the West Coast, wildly popular. On the East Coast, gaining popularity all the time. But it's got things like how to handle change management or incident management, how to set up communication trees, how to set up business resumption plans. If you're a small or medium business, you can't afford to build all that out. Enterprises do it all the time, and they spend a ton of money on it. Well, here, we've got a set of guidelines that save us from having to start from scratch.
What about other skills that are not necessarily security related? And some of the ones I pointed out are certainly cloud and virtualization. And I think there's a lot that's very non-security related, just learning the cloud architecture. I feel like we're light years behind. In other words, I talk to a lot of companies that are either trying to manage it from an IT perspective or a product company that's trying to launch a new product or service in the cloud. And they're all trying to hire cloud experts, cloud architects, and there's a very small talent pool to pull from. I mean, like really small talent pool to pull from. And this, I think, is a huge problem. I think it's preventing a lot of great solutions from being in the cloud and being extremely useful for organizations.
The big thing about the cloud is trust, right? And what I always tell people is Amazon Web Services. They're the big leader in the field. Everybody thinks of AWS when they think of cloud solutions, and they're secure. They take a lot of the precautions. They've hired some of the best professionals in the industry. They do a great job. But the reality of it is, I couldn't name a single person working in the US East 1 data center, the 1A, 1B, 1C. I couldn't name anybody who works there. So how much do I trust a company where I don't even know the first employee? So when they tell me that the drives are being erased before they're being released to other customers, I trust they're doing that, but am I verifying? Am I testing? Have you ever taken a VM and tried to scrub its drive and see what data you can dig up? Is it actually randomized? So having that knowledge that, hey, nobody's perfect. You can't just trust all their systems. You've got to look at it. That's critical. And you've got to understand how their systems work, which is really hard because you can't see their systems. They purposefully hide all that. So understanding how to manage and interact with that, and also knowing that, hey, just because they have a security group in place that you can use like a firewall, it's not a replacement for a firewall, and that you might want to deploy your own software or virtualized firewall in that infrastructure that you control in addition to what they control to better secure that data. It's critical.
And once you trust the cloud, I think then the problem becomes that skills gap that I mentioned earlier about, finding the right person to put the architecture together to host your application in the cloud, do that on a scalable basis. Those people are just really hard to find. I think IT people in general with some of that deeper cloud knowledge, from my own experiences, are definitely difficult to find. So how do we close that gap? Do you guys have training on the cloud, some of the cloud stuff, the AWS stuff?
We do from the administration and systems admin side, so how to properly deploy things in there. And we cover some of the security concepts in there, but we're actually working on a new series to focus on cloud security. We did a little of the CSSP, CCSP, I get my acronyms mixed up on this one, but the Cloud Security Professional, which is ISC squared, if I remember right. So we did a series there that covers some things, and it does vary a bit from vendor to vendor, but for the most part, some of the technologies are commonplace. So things like, hey, you should encrypt your hard drives. Don't hit a check mark in their wizard that says encrypt the hard drive, because who's holding the key then? You encrypt the drives, and then that way you hold the key, and So there's various areas like that you need to be aware of, and it's really just in the cloud that you have that, whereas locally, if you have an on-premises server, you can control it far more thoroughly.
Yeah, and I think that's what's slowing some of the adoption on certain organizations and going to the cloud is that lack of skills. Like, we can go in the cloud, but do we have anyone who has the expertise, not one to deploy in the cloud, a little easier to find, to deploy securely in the cloud? That's even more difficult to find because there's so many bells and whistles and options and different ways to deploy into the cloud, whether it's an application or whether it's a total virtual environment. And then how do you build the virtual tunnel back? And then that technology changes so much that having a good grasp on how to do that, I think, is just going to take time. And I want to encourage people, if you're looking for areas to specialize in IT or in IT security, cloud is one of the ones that you should really have already started on, but at least now start learning, one, how to build infrastructure in the cloud, and two, how to secure infrastructure in the cloud, because they're two completely different things in a way.
Yeah, and I was at RSA this year, and I came across a company. I'm Googling just feverishly back here, trying to find the company name again. There were some gentlemen, they were out of Texas, if I remember right. One of them was a nuclear physicist, and the other one was a cryptographer. And they got together, and they were talking about the problem of generating entropy in the cloud. And a lot of the viewers are probably familiar with that, but whenever you do any kind of random number generation like we do when we're creating salts or any kind of hashing, you're going to deal with pulling from entropy. You'll pull from your random number generator. Well, in a virtualized environment, your random number generation is virtualized. And just by the nature of virtualization, that somebody had to write that, it's not truly random anymore. And there are some prediction attacks that can happen. And that's not something that happens on a physical server, but in a virtual server, it can. So when you're dealing with a cloud solution like Microsoft Azure or AWS or Google Compute, they can pass through the random number generation to hardware. But again, you don't have access to that hardware, so you don't know if you can actually trust that. So there's these companies that have now created these impressive entropy generators, and you can fire one up even on your local network and connect to them over the network and pull entropy from hardware on these other sides that you can trust. And these guys, they created one that the one who was the nuclear physicist, they actually built a little photon generator inside of it. So it would create photons or a light beam, and it would measure them to create the random data. It was as random as you could get, and near impossible to break. Solutions like that, Amazon doesn't advertise that because they're saying, hey, our stuff is secure. But we can tack these onto the cloud, and now we get security that's even better than some of our physical hardware.
And, we've talked about this on the show in the past as well. I think I like to encourage anyone in IT, especially IT security, to pick up some kind of programming language. And I think that, if you're in a Windows platform or have to interact with Windows in any way, shape, form, or fashion, PowerShell is definitely the language that you want to start learning if you haven't already, and gain a deeper knowledge of that. I think that's the direction of Microsoft. I think that's where they're pushing towards, and I think you're going to be in great shape in your career and able to do your job better with PowerShell. On the Linux Unix side, or even OS 10, right? Bash scripting gets you so far, and we've had debates about this, but certainly Python is becoming one of the standards for a lot of things. I find some of the better libraries to do what I need to do and accomplish my goals are found in Python, certainly interfacing with APIs and the like. Now, of course, there's going to be a religious debate as to which one you learn, and that's fine, but I think, learning one of those two or both is certainly good. I think a web application programming language is certainly applicable as well. I've had to create small web applications for various things. I haven't really found one that I really liked, though. Like PHP is just so horrible. Yeah, you can build something fast, but securing it is way too hard. I've played around with a little bit of Node.js and a little bit of some of the Python ones. There's Django, and then there's Flask. And I'm not a huge fan, really, of any of them, to be honest with you.
That's the sad part, and it is important to learn that. You do in your offensive security training, where if you have somebody who needs to write a script to develop their own exploit or something to test out a vulnerability, you need some language that you're able to write in. And a lot of people go with Python or Perl for scripting because those are nice and well supported pretty much everywhere. But if I've aggregated a bunch of syslogs into a MySQL or MariaDB somewhere, and I just need a quick way, a user interface to interact with that, having a web language makes that easy. And PHP is probably one of the more common ones, one of the more useful ones, but there's plenty of alternatives out there too. Just pick one, and you can at least get by with it.
Yeah, I think it's a critical skill for certainly the security professional, right, to be able to demonstrate something or analyze data, like you said. I usually go towards PHP, right? And actually, in my last job, I was collecting all this data. I'm like, well, I need to make it accessible for people, and I'm not going to email around text files, right? I'm just going to write a little PHP thing so that people can interact with and see my data, my reports. I think there's probably better choices for that, although if you understand like PowerShell or Python, you can just start coding in PHP. There's really no learning curve, which is probably why it has so many security problems, because anyone can write in PHP, right, that knows even a small amount of programming, or really people that don't know programming trying to code in PHP, which is where I think we run into the problems with a lot of the plugins.
Yeah, and if you're writing things just quick and dirty, then most of it is you just Googling for how somebody else did it, not necessarily understanding why, and that's where it's not effective. So it's tough.
And most of the examples out there for PHP are horribly insecure by default. It's just, yeah. Alrighty. Yep. Well, let's do this. Let's take a short break now, And just remind everyone, go to itpro.tv where you can sign up for. Now, do you have training for programming as well? Do you have languages out there, Don?
So we've done some Python training, and we actually just hired our first full-time instructor to be able to start generating that content. So look for that. We'll start in January, so it all hit the site really at the beginning of February. That we'll start seeing more and more developer content creeping up.
Awesome. We'll be right back.